Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Tony Bernardo, Dean of UCLA Anderson School of Management, and I'd like to welcome you to today's discussion, Digital Farming, the role of technology in feeding the planet, hosted by the Easton Technology Management Center. Our Easton Center's mission is leading in a tech-driven world, which acknowledges the fundamental role that technology is playing in almost every company and every sector of our economy, in this case, agriculture. At UCLA Anderson, we are in a unique position with our location, alumni network, and business relationships to better understand the impact of technology in business and in society in areas of product service innovation, new business models, transformation of competition, and the impact on public policy. And it is with this program today, along with so many areas of our society today, that technology can play a fundamental role in enhancing outcomes and improving access if it's tapped appropriately. COVID-19 has accelerated, in many cases, the adoption of technology and created a step function change in how we interact, transact, innovate, and impact others. And as an example of the important Anderson family that I alluded to, our guest speaker today, Mike Stern, head of Climate Corporation and Digital Farming at Bayer Crop Science, is also the father of one of our talented current students, Jordan Stern. When Jordan learned that Terry Kramer uses the Harvard Business School case on Bayer Crop Science in his technology management class, the connection was made of Jordan's father as the case protagonist to Terry and his class. This is a great example of the power of the Anderson community. I hope you all enjoy today's program as part of our own leadership journey to understand the impact of technology on the world around us in such a profound area as feeding the planet. So let me now introduce Terry Kramer, our UCLA Anderson Easton Technology Management Center faculty director, who will moderate today's discussion. Thanks, Terry.
Excellent. Hey, Tony, a big thank you for your welcome, your kind remarks. And also, Tony, just a thank you for allowing all of these leadership learnings to happen in the Anderson community. There's a lot here to be learned and developed, et cetera. So a big thank you. And let me just add my own welcome to Tony's to all of you on this program on digital farming, about the role that technology is playing in feeding the planet. And we're very fortunate to have Mike Stern with us. And one of the things I always like to start out with here is just a little bit of context so we all have the same kind of level set on facts here. So a few important facts here. During the last 60 years, the worldwide area of cropland has fallen by 50% per capita. Going forward, according to a recent study by the World Resources Institute, the global population is expected to rise to 9.8 billion by 2050. By 2050, the overall food demand is going to be on course to increase by more than 50%, and demand for animal-based foods by 70%. Hundreds of millions of people, though, still remain hungry. Agriculture already uses about half of the world's vegetated land, and agriculture-related land use generates about 1/4 of the annual greenhouse gas emissions. Innovation in this area is absolutely essential. In 2018, Bayer bought Monsanto for 66 million euros. It was a 44% premium in what was an all-cash deal. One of the prize assets that Bayer was seeking to acquire here was Climate Corp. Climate Corp is a digital ag platform that was originally acquired by Monsanto for $930 million in 2013. And Climate Corp was a new venture started by several ex-Google employees. Now, advances in technology and digital technology in areas of AI, data, IoT, sensors, drones, all of that has allowed transformational outcomes in agriculture that has allowed improved farming productivity, reduced costs, and enabling the feeding of a growing planet. Specifically, when you look at what Bayer offers in this area, they have Climate Field View, which is a software platform that allows farmers to have a complete picture of their operation. It basically uses 250 layers of data and billions of data points that allow farmers to monitor their field variability, to optimize their inputs, to address problems ultimately before they start. It also enables farmers to use nitrogen and herbicides more efficiently so that they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce pesticide runoff. They also have the capability at Bayer to improve plant breeding, which now includes an in-depth understanding of the genetic makeup of plants. In combination with field view, that data has allowed breeders to develop the ability to better predict which plants will have the highest probability of success. Now, Mike's got an impressive background from Monsanto and now Bayer, VP of U.S. Seeds and Traits, VP of the Americas, and now head of Climate Corp and digital farming, crop science at Bayer. He has a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Denison University, master's degree in organic chemistry from the University of Michigan, and a PhD in chemistry from Princeton. In terms of the format that we're going to use, I'm going to ask Mike a series of questions to better understand his points of view, and then we'll go to Slido for a moderated Q&A. Just go to slido.com, slido.com, and then enter in the event code STERN, his last name, STERN. So Mike, let me just start out a big welcome. It's great to have you here.
Very great to see you again, and thanks for the invitation. I've been looking forward to participating in this event for quite some time.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. And as you know, it was an amazing coincidence with Jordan telling me that you were his father, basically in the protagonist in what was a very interesting case discussion. And Mike, let me start with your leadership journey. I always find that's the most interesting thing to start with. You've had a lot of interesting roles, but especially you've had interesting roles in what seems like an industry that's gone through a mass transformation where data and digital and technology have become much more fundamental. Can you tell us about the journey?
Sure. I often think, maybe everyone's asking the question, hey, what's this chemist from Baltimore, Maryland doing, running the world's largest digital ag platform and working in agriculture for 30 years. And I'm not so sure I could have actually predicted the career path, but it has been quite fantastic for me personally in how I've been able to go ahead and do so many different things. I'm formally trained as a chemist, and I spent my early years at Monsanto, which was a much different company 32 years ago, where we had a drug company, we had a food. We had a food company, we had an ag company, we had a chemical company. It was very, as a scientist, it was a great place to be able to go and work. And so I spent the first 15 years of my career doing technology, going literally from being a bench chemist to doing a whole bunch of different things. And I would say that while I was progressing through that kind of journey in my first half of my career in technology, I had this opportunity to begin to interact with the business teams that were actually selling our products, and that was my first inclination, my first introduction into the commercial side of things, and I ultimately ended up as our global director of technology for chemistry, and we had an animal ag division at the time, and so that's kind of where it started, and I never really thought of myself as a commercial person, meaning that I was going to be a commercial lead. I always kind of thought my career path was, hey, I want to be the chief technology officer of the company. And, but I kept interacting with our commercial team. And I really enjoyed the fact that I learned that, hey, the rigor of my scientific training can be and is valuable in a commercial world, in business. And the concepts that I've learned and as a practitioner of science suit you very well in developing a commercial acumen and running businesses. And so the first, one of the first examples I had of that was simply being asked at a meeting, a business meeting, by the head of North America, whether or not, literally, the guy just came up to me. I've worked with him for a long time, and said, "Hey, Mike, how would you like to be president of Monsanto Canada?" And I was looking around going, "You must be talking to the wrong Mike, Carl. I don't know who you're talking to, But my point is, these opportunities have come along, and they don't always, in your own mind, often you go into, this is my career, and I've laid it out, and the next step is this, and the next step is this. And it doesn't always happen that way. And so, that was an opportunity for me. Even though I didn't take that job, I ended up in another commercial job, and as a CEO of a joint venture we had. And then from there was offered other commercial roles. And I would, to the students, I started out in science, ended up in a joint venture, which was a little bit of science and business, and then came into running a seed business, literally running Monsanto had went out and bought 40 seed companies. And so here I am coming into this business, and I've never sold a bag of seed in my life. Okay. I didn't know anything about seed business. I mean, I'm not a farmer. I mean, I worked in kind of an ag area, but I mean, and I just said, this is interesting. I have something to offer here, and and I stepped through the job, and that was kind of my career going forward from there, to run our North American business, and then running all of the Americas for Monsanto, which was like 80% of the company. And without ever formally having, being trained in business, but learning this and applying my foundational skill sets to a commercial environment, and building and learning from my colleagues, my peers, and some training and other things. And I would say to the team, ultimately, just to finish up here, I was offered opportunities, and there was risks associated with taking those jobs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't according to the plan, and you have to be comfortable in taking career risk if you really want, I think, to be able to advance and learn new things and open brand new doors. And of course, the biggest career risk I think I took was 6.5 years ago, when Hugh Grant, who was the CEO of Monsanto, came to me after a year after we bought Climate, and here I'm running a $8 billion, 10,000 person business, global business, and asked me, Mike, we need you to go to San Francisco and run the Climate Corporation. You have this skill set. It's science, it's commercial. We need to bring it all together, and you're the only one in the company that has all the skills. And so, talk about a risk. Going from this big business to this startup with 150 people in San Francisco that was losing about $20 million a year. Wow. And I will tell you, it was it's been the most incredible experience that I've had, and it culminates my journey. I will announce a little fast that my retirement from Climate and Bear Crop Science was just announced last year. So it truly is the capstone of what I've done.
Wonderful. What a great journey. So, Mike, why don't you now tell us about the transformation going on in agriculture? What does it look like? What does it rely on? How fundamental is the change? And is this similar to so many industries today that are kind of traditional industries that are going through these mass transformations because of the role of data?
Yeah. The digital transformation of agriculture is occurring, but it's not occurring at the same pace that you would expect. What we have observed in digital transformations of other aspects of how we behave in society, how we work in society, as well as other industries. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is, when you think about farmers, they definitely get the fact that they are in a risky business, and they're looking for every technological edge they can find in order to go ahead and improve outcomes on their farms. And they have to manage a lot of variability. But these are all family businesses. I mean, and they assume a lot of risk. And so they're looking for new technology, but they are reluctant to jump into new technology completely all at once. And so it takes time to do that. And if you think about agriculture as well, a farmer, for the most part, plants in the fall, in the spring, and harvests in the fall. And so they have one shot a year, to go ahead and make their living. And if you think about it, if a farmer maybe has 40 chances, there are 45 chances in their professional lifetime to go ahead and do these things. So they're very cautious. Now, having said that, farmers have adopted new technology. If you just kind of look at agriculture, if you go all the way back to the late 1800s, the mechanization of the farm, huge transformation of agriculture when, and then if you think about Norman Borlaug and what went on there, in thinking about breeding and how we can begin to think about breeding plants differently, particularly wheat. And then, more recently in biotechnology and using the genetic markers and the genetic basis for plant breeding. All these were huge watershed events. But if you look at the time course, they've taken, in biotechnology, for instance, it took years for it to get established and then really taken off. So I feel like that same is going to happen with digital tools. But it is moving rapidly now, more rapidly, and we can talk a little bit more about climate and how we've catalyzed some of that. But it's not going to be at the same pace that you've seen in other technology and other applications of other technologies and other industries.
Let me ask you this though, Mike, if I understand the case right in the background is basically there is data that's collected on weather, on soil condition, on seed, et cetera. And then there's a set of recommendations made to a farmer to improve productivity and reduce cost. And we actually looked in the case, we looked at how costly it is for land, how costly it is for seed, how costly it is for fertilizer, et cetera. And you're basically going to these farmers and saying, listen, we can boost your output, reduce cost. Why is that not a more adoptable solution?
Yeah. So growers get it, but there truly are some barriers to the adoption of this. Some of it is generational. The average age, I'll just use the US, the average age of a farmer in the US is 58 years old. And so there's a reluctance to, they're just not as tech savvy and a reluctance to kind of do things new. I can't tell you how many farmers I've talked to and farms I've been on where they said, yeah, well, I kind of make the seed decision, this and that, but my son here kind of does the technology. And the technology is pretty much, in the early days, it's really like, okay, new technology on the farm is like auto steer in a John Deere tractor, that type of thing. So I think they recognize that there is the value there, but there's some real challenges to the adoption of equipment compatibility. How do we actually begin to integrate these tools into their decision-making process? And the big piece of trust, again, gets back to, hey, my livelihood's on this. I don't really understand this technology. It's not core to my experience yet. You're telling me that I'm going to put my trust into this company that's out in San Francisco, really, and you're going to give me recommendations about how better to manage my farm, and I've been doing this for 30 years. Those are real world challenges, and I will say, the key to break through that, and we'll talk perhaps a little bit more about it, is you have to find the right product and the right product market fit. And what is the key pain point that you need to solve in order to begin to get people over this activation energy barrier? And lastly, I will say, COVID actually has been somewhat of an accelerator of that, because it has forced farmers to do things much more digitally, whether it's communicate with their retailer, whether it's think about how I'm going to buy products, and actually how they're going to interact with the climate corporation. So it's a complicated system.
Yeah. So on that topic, Mike, how do you get farmers to adopt? So as an example, if there's this reticence to adopt, but the value proposition is good in better productivity, lower costs, et cetera, have you thought about outcomes-based pricing where you share improved outcomes, you do a baseline, et cetera? Are there things like that would kind of accelerate this adoption? Yeah.
So, let me kind of go to how we got them to adopt, because, just to give the team some numbers, and I don't think these are actually in the case, but, when we launched FieldView and created it and launched it in 2016, it wasn't really part of Climate Corporation when we bought it, but we developed it through some key acquisitions and then of some foundationary technology. We had been studying the market, early on, and realized that the pain point, which actually is universal with row crop farmers, that was our entree, is that farmers were collecting data from a variety of ways, whether they're writing notes down literally in a notebook, or whether they're using some of the equipment to record what's going on in their field. They had enormous amounts of data, yet they had no way to organize it. They had no way to get any value out of it, and they didn't know what to do with it. And they were looking for someone to be able to come in and help them bring all of that together in a very simple way that they could begin to understand cause and effect of the decisions they were making on the farm, independent of any recommendation anyone else would give them. And that's the core of FieldView, is that we have developed a system that allows them to digitize their operations on a meter by meter basis in their fields, organize all that data, allow them to visualize what's going on, what they planted, where they planted it, how planting this hybrid and how it affected yields here. All without, again, we're not making any recommendations here. We're just organizing right now. We're organizing their data for them. And that was the pain point. Help me make sense of what I'm already doing. And the way to think about that now has been, when we launched FieldView in 2016 on 5 million acres, we went from 5 million acres in the first year to 15 to 30 to 60 to 100. And then last year we were on 150, from starting in million acres, excuse me. I didn't get 150 million acres, where we started in North America. Now we operate in 3 continents and 23 countries. North America, South America, 4 continents, Australia, Europe, Africa, so that was the basis of this, Terry. So, we had to start with find the need. What is the pain point? Design the product to fit that pain point, right? And that was the entree to begin to build a trust with our farmer customer, right? Mm-hmm. And there was hey, we've digitized your data and you're sharing that data with us. And because you're sharing that data with us, we think now we can utilize that data to turn it around to give you better advice on how to manage your farm. And that's not the way agriculture has worked in the past. The way agriculture has worked in the past is, hey, a farmer, there's a field day and there's 50 products planted in a field. The farmer drives 25 miles down the road. There's a bunch of sales reps out there and they're showing them the corn and the soybeans and whatever it is. And that's great, but it's not their field. Mm-hmm. We were able then to say, hey, by using FieldView, helping you organize your data, sharing your data with us, we can come back and begin then to actually do something specifically for the 40 fields that you farm. And that was a game changer in the minds of farmers. It was something that was never done before. So they had this benefit of actually having this tool that digitized all their information to make it easy for them to see what they were doing, and the promise of how data will transform their ability to improve productivity on their farm, higher yields, help them reduce their risk, help them farm more sustainably, and generally simplify their operation. And in a nutshell, that's how we've begun to transform agriculture with Climate FieldView. So,
and Mike,
it's been very successful.
With the risk of sounding like a banker for a minute, let me go down this track. You've got a solution that is going to improve productivity, lower costs. You're fairly confident of that. The data, et cetera. Is there a move, whether it's at Bayer or whether it's large farms, to basically say, we're going to go buy out these farms that are going to it's going to be my grandchildren before there's adoption that occurs. I'm going to buy these farms out, boost the productivity, similar to what Zillow is starting to do now, where they're buying properties and flipping them themselves and owning the asset. Is there some kind of view in your mind that that's actually a better route to creating value here?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, it's sort of like if you got the equation to make it better, why wouldn't you just do it yourself, right? Yeah. And that's not an irrational thought, but you have to also put it into the context of the broader ecosystem that we are participating in. And actually who we are, right? So, not saying it's right, but we're part of Monsanto. Monsanto's business was selling inputs and technology to farmers. Bayer's business is selling inputs and technology to farmers. Farming is highly competitive, and it's a very it's very difficult to put yourself in a position that you become a direct competitor of your customer. Now, so it's a really great, this is a debate that it's a really interesting question. It kind of goes to, well, how do you transform an industry if you're part of it? How do you cannibalize your own business? Do you want to cannibalize your own business? Excuse me. Ultimately, I believe ultimately the economics play out of all this, but that journey might be very different. I mean, and I would say right now, that's not where we are, right? That's first of all, our algorithms are good, but they need to get better, and it's been very challenging. It's just really challenging science, and that's one reason why there's lots of companies out there dabbling in it, but you need a very diverse data set to actually make it happen. And some of that's publicly available. A lot of it is privately available, proprietary, genetics, because we're looking at trying to solve an equation that says yield is a function of the genetics in the field, the environment that those seeds, those genetics are exposed to, and the decisions that the farmers make to manage that crop. And somehow you need to bring that very diverse data set, I've simplified it, of course, to the table. So, a good question. In theory, that's where you would think this would go, but there's a lot of real practical challenges to get there. So, least of which is, what's the ecosystem we're part of, right?
Yeah. So if you don't do it yourself, do you have a risk that the large farms are going to consolidate, and then now you're selling to somebody that's much, much bigger? It's all the Michael Porter stuff about competitive strategy, that now you've lost some of your leverage because you're selling to big farmers that have lots of data, and you need them more than they need you. I'm dramatizing it a little bit, but is there some play there that is worrisome?
Well, look, it's always good to be paranoid in business. That would be another tidbit to the team, to the students out there. I mean, there are scenarios out there. This is how I think about it. And again, this is a journey we've been on now for almost 7 years. So we've learned a lot from where we started. First of all, some demographics. The consolidation. Everyone's talking about the consolidation of farms. The consolidation of farms in the U.S. and in other parts of the world is actually relatively slow. This is not like some inflection point. If you look at, farmers in the United States, when I was running our business, so let's say 6 years ago, it's a little dated, that farmed more than 10,000 acres, there was under 400 of them. Okay. And 10,000 acres, is not, it was farmed over 10,000 acres. I might have said over 10,000 acres, So it's happening, but it's happening relatively slowly. So the first thing is the demographics of this is, hey, you need to keep your eye on that. But the other piece is this data piece, and I think this is really important. And you mentioned, let me give you a little bit of scale here. Even if you were consolidating a big farm, we work with big farms in South America, where there's some of the largest farms in the world, in South America and the Ukraine. South America, we work with farms that are farming 500,000 acres. That's huge. The average size farm in the United States is 1,500 acres. Okay. So 500,000 acres. And they're trying to collect data, and they're trying to build their systems. They're field view customers. They're field view customers because it's incredibly hard, one, to do. And two, they've recognized that they need more data. The data that just from their farm is useful, but it's not sufficient. And in the United States today, we are working on data sets just of this very unique data set that we have, which is farmer data. What actually is happening on a meter by meter basis in a field? What I planted, the density I planted it, what are the environmental conditions, how I harvested, what's the fertilizer on? I mean, all of these, you said 250 data layers. The power of a field view and a power of data is to be able to bring these to bring this, if you will, might call it this very large and disparate data set of all these different operations on a farm. Where in the United States, our models typically are, we're looking at 20 million acres, just to develop a single model in the US, plus proprietary genetic information, massive, weather information. It's just, it's hard. It takes an awful lot of data, and what we do is we can aggregate that data. So in the United States, I'll give you a quick example of this. You develop a corn hybrid. There's about 90 million acres of corn planted every year in the United States. We develop corn hybrids. It takes 7 years to do, and those corn hybrids get developed through this life cycle, maybe get planted on 300 to 500 acres in their entire development, because they're planted on very small strip trials. We've been able to develop the technology to be able to pick the best hybrids out to do that. Well, hey, when you launch that hybrid now, and there's the customers who buy it are on field view, that hybrid will go out the door and it might get planted in its first year on 300,000 acres. So all of a sudden you have this enormous new data set across multiple states and all sorts of different environments. And so the power of what we can do with field view is we can begin to aggregate all this data. So here are 1,500 farmers that planted this hybrid in similar soil types at the same planting date and had this 3 weather parameters in the first trimester of planting. And you can bring that together and you can think about how that can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what's valuable about that is all that data gets aggregated. And now from that, we can help all the farmers, not just the farmers, individually, who submitted the data. We can now extend that and extrapolate some of this into many, many other fields. And so that's the power of the data set. And so I definitely a challenge, and it could happen, but our learnings have been to really solve this equation where there is variability. I didn't give you the whole equation, but there's another term that has to do with variability that we don't control in the field. You need a lot of data.
Yeah,
that's just the bottom line.
Yeah. And on the value creation now for Bayer, just to better understand what happens here, question is how much cannibalization actually happens and how do you make money? So if you're developing more productive fields or crops for your farmers, seed volume pro rata goes down. If you're helping reduce the amount of herbicides and crop protection, all that, less revenue there. How are you making money? Are you assuming that you're gaining share in the marketplace? Are you assuming that you're making money on field view on a per acre basis? Tell us about the value creation for you and the risk you've got of cannibalization.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Let me unpack it in kind of chunks because it's really important to understand it. And there's a lot of lessons here again for the students because, so let's start at what was the premise when Monsanto went and spent $1 billion to buy climate, right? The premise there was, hey, we could bring this environmental modeling, big data folks in San Francisco together with our very unique data set that we have of years and years and years of agricultural data that we've developed and our genetic data. And if you could bring that together, you could begin to develop information that you could go ahead and sell to farmers. Data, information. This is how you should. Hey, for $5 an acre, you will give you information how better to plant your corn seed. Right? I'm just making that up, and that was the premise that we were going to sell information to farmers, and that whether on fertility, or seed, or crop protection, or modeling weather, or whatever that might be. And on paper, that was great, but it turned out to be wrong. And so. You have to evolve. And another, for all the students out there, hey, this is uncharted territory. I mean, when we started this, there wasn't like there was this business out there. There was business ideas out there. And again, one of the main reasons why I took this job was I felt, hey, you don't have that many opportunities in your career to actually create something brand new. So that's a little bit of a side, kind of getting back to the career piece. So, we started thinking that, hey, we were going to go ahead and sell information directly to a grower, and we were going to be brand agnostic. That we were going to go ahead and do this hey, not only were we going to make recommendations on Monsanto products at that point, or Bayer products, but we were going to make recommendations on Pioneer products, which is Corteva today, or BASF products, and that that's how this business was going to evolve, and that would evolve cannibalization to a certain degree. But it didn't. It just turned out, if you go to your customer, this is of course where you always have to go. You have to go talk to your. They will send you down the path of truth, one way or another. And it turns out that they were saying, "Hey, we're buying a $300 bag of seed from you." I'm kind of paraphrasing it all, but we're buying a $300 bag of seed from you, and now you're telling me that you're going to go with this division of your company, then sell me for X dollars an acre the information I need to best optimize it on my farm. That was a problem. When we really began to have information that we could sell. Hey, here's the better way to plant your seed, and in a variable rate seed density that optimizes the variation in your soil type. It's called a seed script, like a prescription for your field. Took a lot of time to develop that. It's great technology. We have it today. But a grower wasn't too interested in being charged extra for it because of that dynamic. Hey, and what we learned is, hey, what we want is, we want a company like Monsanto or Bayer now. We want you to come with a complete solution. We don't want to have 15 different apps. If you can come to us with a complete solution, that's what's valuable to us. A relationship with you that you, from soup to nuts, inputs and information that helps me have a better return on my investment. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And so we really had to pivot our thinking there, right? As opposed to, and so where we are today, we actually, and there's a big competitive advantage to this too. If you're the largest and the biggest, then we are the biggest in climate, and we are the largest now in Bayer, but every one of the multinationals are competing with us with digital tools. We ultimately came together and said, hey, look, the real value is bringing everything together. And so today we sell our products as part of, in conjunction with the physical products that we sell. So if climate's products are sold linked directly to the seed sale or the crop protection sale. I'll give you an example. For instance, when we started, we sold FieldView subscriptions, depending on the size of your farm, anywhere between $750 a year and $4,000 a year. If your model is ultimately you need data from the farm to drive the value proposition to create these algorithms, and then you couple that with, hey, really what you want to do is bring all this together in a package, you quickly come to the conclusion that you should be giving your software away. Now, that's not a novel thing for like classic software companies. Took me a little bit of time to get over that. But today, our FieldView products are offered in marketing programs that are, if you can get FieldView for free, or you can buy it now for $99 if you want, but you can get it for free if you buy 100 bags of seed. Or if you're in a loyalty program that we have in South America, you can get it for free. And that has allowed us to dramatically increase adoption of FieldView as the tool. There's no barrier. Growers get the fact that, hey, this is all part of how I can improve my operation holistically. And we are gathering an enormous amount of data that will then drive a flywheel of better information, better algorithms that we can then get back into the hand of the farmer in combination with the seeds that we sell at Bayer. And collectively, it's the best offer in the marketplace because we're driving outcomes on their farm. Our first algorithm we did this with was something called a seed advisor, where we were able now to go ahead and use a lot of data, this very large data set, and create an algorithm that pretty much said, hey, these are the best genetics to plant in your field. And we've tested that for 3 years. And, that's that constantly gives a 4 to 6 bushel advantage to those farmers.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
Does that mean, though, that you're not recommending your competitors' seed and products?
We're not recommending our competitors' seed and products right now. We came to the conclusion, a couple things. First of all is you need a lot of data to make good recommendations on products, and we don't have all that data from our competitors. We certainly don't have their proprietary data. Now, I will tell you, this is an evolution, right? We started with one business model. It evolved to a different business model, which is being very successful right now. So we make our money through ultimately the sale and increased sale and the retention of Bayer Crop Sciences seed and crop protection chemistry, right? That's augmented with the information that we get. But the more information that we get in the field, because customers who use FieldView aren't 100% just Bayer customers. In fact, in the United States, a farmer typically plants 2.5 different brands of corn seed on their farm. We believe today that we have more information from FieldView on Pioneer products than they do in the field of actual usage in the field. So there's a path to a different business model in the future, right? There's a path to, well, I should say this. There's a path to being able to make a rational business decision at some point. Is it better to shift to a more brand agnostic approach when you're the leader and you've been able to incorporate some of that into what you're doing within Bayer? And then think about it as, boy, if we can just do it in Bayer, but if we could integrate this under all the seeds in the marketplace now, right? Maybe that's a more valuable proposition. Maybe it's a slightly different business model, or maybe it's a partnership with some of these companies. There's lots of different things that you can get to. But we definitely had to change our, multiple times and refine it, and our own business model. So, we're not really in a place right now where it's either or with, hey, if we do this, we're cannibalizing our business. We're actually completely on the other side of it. By bringing it all together, we think we can dramatically accelerate our ability to grow the business collectively, because we can provide a more holistic, integrated, tailored solution to a farmer in their field. And they're very interested in buying that. And they're very interested in getting it from a company that can give them the complete package.
And so that path to another model, there's a reference in the case to whether you should structure the businesses in Amazon.com. And basically you're a recommendation engine, you're selling a bunch of people's products and you'll get more value, but you need to separate the business from the core. I assume that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Again, learnings, if we had this conversation 6.5 years ago, it would be a really short conversation, right? And so we've learned, we've learned a lot to execute on a more brand agnostic and a more broad information delivery system to the industry. Being closely linked to a company like Bayer, like we are, and that's what our business model is now, actually is a hindrance. It's an obstacle, because people doubt that you would ever be able, if you're wholly owned by Bayer, will you ever really give me a truthful recommendation? Will you ever really give me the best recommendation? Or is it only going to be the best recommendation within Bayer? Or 80% of the time, it's going to be the best recommendation. You can see how, so there's lack of trust there. And so, this ability to be at arm's length, I think, is important in a concept where you expand your business model to be more or you want to call it Amazon, or being able to make recommendations on many, many different products, or even partner more in the industry to be able to do that, as you think not just about inputs, but something we haven't talked about that's part of our developing businesses. There's an enormous amount of value that's going to be created connecting, and you can see it in everything, farm to fork, and, whether you think about carbon credits, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, and sustainable agriculture. There's a lot of value to be created at the top of that value chain around retail and consumer, that has to be linked all the way back to the provenance of that grain, on the farm. And FieldView is the system that can do that. But if you want to think about building those types of alliances, it's potentially hard to do that while you're buried inside of Bayer, and so that arm's length piece, that independence brings credibility to this broader ability to access other and perhaps new value pools in a very much evolving ecosystem and growing ecosystem that we can call digital agriculture, or the food tech, or however you want to think about it. But so real world problems, guys out there, these are real world challenges that it's, you have ideas, but you actually, they're complicated, and you have to figure out the sequence and how do you test them, and how do how do you really get there?
Yeah, let me start taking. There's a whole bunch of questions from the students here. The first one you're starting to touch on, and I want to expand it a bit. But Caroline asks, how do you weigh the benefits and versus costs of Climate Corp being part of a large agricultural conglomerate versus being an independent play? And let me, add to that this whole idea about what risk do you have of a digital first company coming in over the top of you while you're kind of working through all these issues. And let me give you one more data point. I shared with the afternoon class. There's a brand new HBS case written on Moderna. It's developed a vaccine company. They consider themselves a technology company, not a life sciences company. And we just had an event last night, and there's a little bit of worry about these tech companies, competing in an era of AI, that they're moving across sector. Do you have a risk of that happening? And how do you think about driving success in this world?
Yeah. So, a lot of stuff there are good. So first of all, to the question, I think I addressed a little bit of this, if you really want to be kind of the brand agnostic deliverer of digital information to farmers, I do think it's very difficult to do that being completely and wholly owned by a single large conglomerate. There has to be a structure that evolves that changes that, and that is commensurate then, with what type of incremental value can be generated by changing that structure. And I think those are really good business questions, and ones that, as you could imagine, we grapple with all the time. With respect to nervousness and about the other technology companies, absolutely. And so it kind of gets back to this competitive environment. So, but let me just for me real fast. There's like three big buckets out there. There's the multinationals like Bayer, and now Corteva and BASF and Syngenta, right? The kind of big four ag companies. They all have digital platforms. There's a whole bunch of startups out there, actually catalyzed by the purchase of Climate by Monsanto. Billions of dollars have been invested in digital agriculture companies around the world. Thousands and thousands of companies. Typically, they have a tough time competing because they don't have access to the farmer, and this is a very different business. You have to think about that in distribution. How do you actually get access to farmers around the world? Well, that's very well established, and the big companies like us have retail distribution channels, and we have sales teams, and that's very expensive to build. Mm-hmm. So they're there, but the other big company things out there are Microsoft, AWS, Amazon, Google, IBM. Now, I imagine you cannot, I see this because I'm always looking at it, but in the future, any commercial of one of those companies you will see now, you will see somewhere in there a tractor going through a field. It'll be a quick little 3-second thing, but it'll be a tractor going through a field. All right. And have some vision of agriculture. And so they're all very interested in it. And I do think it's a threat. I shouldn't say it's a natural evolution for those platform companies and big data companies that already have made enormous investments in their infrastructure to manage data and do really neat things with it. They're constantly looking for what's the next vertical. And to them, that next vertical, it's not just agriculture, it's the entire food chain, right? Mm-hmm. So absolutely, Terry, and so how do you think about that? How do you participate in that? Well, those are all real big questions. And to the students again out there, I also think in those types of environments and how I think about them, you need to really understand where you compete and what your competitive advantage is and what you bring to the table that differentiates you in this kind of vertical. Mm-hmm. And because partnerships are going to happen. This industry is going to consolidate. You can't go forward with the amount of investment that's going on here, and these thousands of and everyone getting involved in it without some structural changes, I think. And so, how you participate in that or catalyze that are really important things that have to be top of mind. I mean, as a CEO, those are the types of things you need to be thinking about. That's what I'm not thinking about where the next farmer is coming from. I'm thinking about those things, right? That's my job, to be thinking. But just as you think, as all of you aspire to business leadership careers.
Good. Another question here, Mike. China owns a majority of farmland in Africa. Bill Gates is buying farmland in the US hand over fist. How do we prevent national or individual consolidation?
Well, it's it's really hard. Some countries do it very clearly. Hey, foreign countries, people can't own land. They can't buy land in certain countries. I think there's some good aspects of that, and there's some bad aspects of that. I mean, I think when you get Gates and others and those foundations that are looking to buy farmland in a variety of different places, I actually think at the end of the day they're trying to move agriculture forward, probably trying to get a return on their investment, of course, but really trying to move agriculture forward. But I think that is going on, and the only way that I have seen to get in the way of the economics, because those are for the most part economic decisions that these, maybe Gates has a little more a little different vision of what they want to do with it, but the companies that are doing it are making economic calls on this. And so if you really want to restrict that, the only way that I've been able to see to do that is through regulation, and countries are doing that. And they're saying, hey, we're not going to let foreign nationals and foreign individuals own land in our country. They can rent land, but they're not going to be able to own it.
Yep. Good. Very helpful. Next question. This one comes from Paul. How does Climate Corp balance financial and societal outcomes, particularly in relation to non-corporate farms or farms in emerging markets that have limited resources?
Yeah, great question. Hey, sustainability, and what I think digital ag will do in agriculture, it goes all the way back to your earlier comments. Look, hey, arable land will continue to decrease. Population will increase. We need to figure out, I use a term called, we're gonna have to figure out how to sustainably intensify agriculture. That means we're gonna have to figure out how to produce more food on less land with fewer inputs in a changing environment, a climate, and so that's what the promise of this technology really is. That's what we need to be able to do. Now, with respect to smallholders or different environments, we've invested in smallholder farmers, and at Bayer, we have a big commitment to improve the lives of over 100 million smallholder farmers, and digital is a big piece of that. We started with a program in India with climate called FarmRise. Briefly, essentially, smallholder farmers, we have big row crop farmers and we have different technologies. Smallholder farmers might be farming an acre or 2 acres or 3 acres or something like that. And what their needs are, and again, product market fit, what is it that they need is very different than a guy in Iowa. What they need is agronomic information. And how are they going to get that agronomic? They're going to get that agronomic information that's on a cell phone, right? There's 100 million smallholder farmers or 200 million in India, huge number. You can't put a sales team together to go touch them all. Digital technology is going to be a way to do it. So they need agronomic information. It's going to be delivered digitally through tools on a cell phone, smartphone. They need market discovery information to figure out what they want to plant. Okay. And they need, and plant and sell, because typically they do not have that market price discovery going on. They're very limited. That in the digital world, you can provide them, here are prices in 3 markets near you, as opposed to just going to one. And they need digital access to financing and other services like that. And so we built tools in India to test all those, and they resonate. And we've we're going to be expanding those in other areas as well. So these digital tools apply to smallholder farmers around the world. It's just a completely different value proposition for them. It's very different. It's a different system, and but a lot of demand.
Yep. And would you subsidize in some of the emerging markets where the willingness to pay might be lower? Do you subsidize, or are there government models or nonprofit models that accelerate availability?
Yeah, there's no way to do this on your own. So it's really, this is not in Asia. sub-Saharan Africa, and in parts of Central and you can't do this. You need to partner. There are government partnerships. There's other private companies that are going to partner. There's foundations. It's very hard for one company to pull it all off. And I don't think it's, so that's our approach. How do you partner? Hey, how do you bring what you can bring to the table? And then how do you partner with others who can actually go ahead and augment and bring a complete package to these growers? And that's going to be the way this is going to evolve. And it's evolving now. And it's not just private companies, it's NGOs, it's government agencies, it's banks, it's all sorts of different sectors that need to come together to really make a difference in smallholder farming.
Yep. Let me ask you a last question, Mike, before I do a summary here. If you were to fast forward 10 or 15 years from now and just say, what does agriculture look like? What is the role of technology? What is the structure of farming and farmers? How does the ownership structure look for Climate Corp? Just go forward 10 years for us and tell us how you think that might look.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that virtually all the decisions on a farm will be made with better information and digitally enhanced. There's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be a lot more autonomy on a farm, meaning from a autonomous vehicle perspective, the ability to deliver inputs to the farm. Inputs will be delivered and they will be much more precisely delivered. I mean, not just seed and the ability to really place the seed on a on a 6-inch, grid on the field and understand each of those seeds. But crop protection will change completely to be much more precise. Broad acre spraying will be replaced by on edge, compute. With computer vision, looking specifically at weeds, on edge computing that and, directing nozzles to be very, very precise. So the autonomy, the digital infrastructure that will go into, one more thing I will say, there will be sensors on the farm that are going to be providing a much richer data set than we even have today. So that's kind of how it's going to, that's how it's going to happen. And I believe kind of the structure of, and by the way, one more thing there, I've mentioned it a little bit. Hey, what's going on the farm will be completely transparent and connected to the food that we buy. That, there will be complete democratization of that information, and it will create new value in doing that. If you think about the structure of climate, just to finish up, hey, fundamentally, we're developing a platform, a digital farming platform business. Mm-hmm. And, successful platform businesses pretty much end up like 70-20-10, like there's 3 of them, maybe 2. Yeah. No more than 3, right? I mean, just look at it over and over in the industry. You know it well, Terry, and I'm sure you've taught it in the class, and there's too much money being invested into this area right now with too little returns not to see this type of transformation. And so the question is who are going to be those platforms, right? I will vote that climate's going to be one of those platforms.
Well said. Very well said. Mike, let me do this. I always like to try and summarize my takeaways and then give you a chance to upgrade them or any parting comments that you've got. I've got 6 main takeaways I got. First of all, the most fundamental level, the value creation potential of digital farming is huge. When you talk about connected fields and the knowledge, the data that can improve productivity, lower costs, et cetera, at that very high level, the value creation is significant. The second general point that I got is about what are the enablers that allow this all to happen? And you called out, I thought, 2 key enablers. One is the data itself, that you need large data sets to make this goodness happen. This is not for the faint of heart, not for small sample sizes, et cetera, but you need large data sets. And that the second part of all this is you need farmers to adopt, that you've got to have them kind of believe in what you're doing. And they may end up being the gating item, not the technology, not the insights, but the farmers themselves. The next point that I got is this idea about an evolution of business models. That your mindset about when you were buying Climate Corp and how you're going to monetize is different than where it is today, and likely is going to be different than the 10-year scenario you described in the future. And that's partly driven by what it takes to get adoption, as opposed to the purity of just go from 1 to 10 here and let's kind of get to what we need to. The next point that I got is the idea of competition. And your biggest worry are some of the tech competitors. And not worry that you have, 18 levels of detail about what they're going to do, but just trying to kind of do a time and motion study and a kind of relationship of what they've done before in other sectors. They're somebody to watch out for. And then the last point that I got, which I thought was a fascinating one, is about this view about where is all of this going? Better decision-making, better autonomy, more precision or customization, more transparency and democratization, and ultimately potentially a platform-based business. So it fundamentally looks at what the consumer experience is going to be, what the business structure, the business model is going to be. And by the way, a thank you, because my students had assigned to look at Michael Porter's article on smart connected devices and how they transform competition. And it's a lot of what you talk about autonomy and how it changes the whole business model. But those are the 6 or 7 takeaways that I got. Any upgrades on those or parting comments?
Well, first of all, I think that's a great summary. I would only have one quick parting, 2 really fast. One is on the value creation, because just want to give you a sense of what kind of value creation we're talking about just at the farm gate, independent at retail food. But I like to, today the average corn yield in the United States is 175 bushels per acre. But we know through different competitions and studies that the genetic high-end yield that we can see today for corn is 600 bushels per acre. Okay. So there's a lot of hope out there. I want to leave. There's an enormous opportunity for us to use better information to truly get to the genetic potential of the plants we are breeding today. And that gets to this whole concept of sustainable intensification of agriculture. And really where I am on this, and what got me so excited about it is, look, we have to figure out a different way to feed the planet. And we it's going to have to be, by getting more from less. And the good news is the seeds are capable of doing it. It's how do we make better decisions around everything else to really build this ecosystem and this ability to go ahead and feed the world. And I firmly believe that digital agriculture and the work that we're doing and others are doing in this field will fundamentally transform how we convert natural resources into food in the future. And we need to do that.
Yeah. What a great message, Mike. This is a living example. I'm teaching a new course in the spring on technology and society. And I think your message here is this is an example, if managed well, that you can fundamentally improve societal outcomes by feeding the planet, by doing it in a lower cost way that reduces greenhouse gas emissions if you manage all this well. And so it's a win-win if you execute well on this.
I agree. Great.
Good. Mike, a huge thank you. A thank you for the time with us. Thank you for a great case that I think it's got a great set of learnings. And I hope if your schedule permits, we can have you come back again very, very soon.
Always delighted to work with you, Terry, and the students. And thank you for having me. And thanks for all the great questions.
You bet. Take care. We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.